I would like to welcome you to Temple Israel. We are incredibly honored to be hosting this event and grateful that our panelists are here to help us better understand the hate that we are seeing and the extremism that is born of that hatred. Before we begin our program tonight, I would like to take a moment to thank the West Bloomfield Police Department and our entire security team. The necessity for tonight's level of security is proof that the world has allowed hate to run rampant, and we have much work to do to heal our world. And sadly, the Jewish community is not the only target for hatred and extremism. Many groups have found themselves othered and face physical or emotional danger. Conversations like the ones we are having tonight are important steps towards understanding, tolerance, and, God willing, a greater peace between people of different backgrounds of all kinds. Beyond thanking our police and security staff, we would also like you to know that tonight's program is brought to you by the Greater West Bloomfield Civic Center TV live stream, and they are recording tonight's town hall. If you would like a link to the video sent to you after, it's posted. And there are also sheets in the back with the little QR code, the square, in the back of the room where you can fill out your name and email, and they will send you a copy. And you can also find them on civiccentertv.com. As Jews, we always return to the idea that every human being is created in the image of God and thus deserves the same respect, honor, and dignity. It goes without saying that that also means that every human being should live in safety, without fear, and offered every opportunity to live out their dreams in the United States of America. As Jews, we also return to the cause of the fall of the Second Temple in the year 70 AD. Yes, in terms of archaeology, the Romans destroyed the temple, but Jewish tradition teaches that the true reason for the fall of the temple was sinat chinam, baseless hatred between people. Hatred for the Jewish people is powerful enough to destroy sacred spaces. How much more so the human heart? Tonight we will be hearing from experts in this subject, leaders who are working in the areas of legislation, law, education, and advocacy at the highest levels. And we begin with State Representative Noah Arbit. He is a proud West Bloomfield native and a son of Temple Israel. And he is serving in his second term in the Michigan House of Representatives, representing the 20th District, which includes all of West Bloomfield, the eastern half of Commerce Township, the cities of Keego Harbor, Orchard Lake, Sylvan Lake, and the northwesternmost corner of Bloomfield Township. Noah is responsible for the creation and passage of the Michigan Hate Crime Act. This law expands the basis on which hate crimes can be prosecuted in Michigan to include hate crimes committed against Michiganders with disabilities, LGBTQ+, and seniors, all classes of people excluded from the protections from hate crimes under the current law. In addition, the Michigan Hate Crime Act strengthens penalties for hate crimes to be among the toughest in the nation. Please welcome Representative Noah Arbit.
Pardon me. Thank you so much, Rabbi Jen. It feels like yesterday that I was just up on this bima doing my bar mitzvah in 2008. And thank you so much to our Attorney General, Dana Nessel, for being here and for being my partner in all of this work. And thank you so much. Yes. And thank you so much to the brilliant Dr. Cynthia Miller-Idriss of PERIL, whom I have long admired and who has amazing books that you can read, including Hate in the Homeland and a new book, Man Up, about misogyny, which you should definitely read, and does amazing work that I hope that will give you hope tonight about the fact that there's work that we can do to actually reduce these ills that we see in our society. And thank you so much to both of you for being here and for sharing your wisdom and your expertise with us tonight. And I want to thank also my intrepid team, Maya and Nathan in the back, and Alexis from the State House, the team here at Temple, Jason Plotkin, Claudia Lutman, Alex Wolf, and Ron Lieberman. And thank you especially to the West Bloomfield Police Department, Chief Dale Young, for keeping us safe here tonight and all times, and to all of our partnering organizations. And most of all, thanks to each of you for coming tonight and for being engaged in these important issues. I hope you will find tonight informative and enlightening and reassuring in that while the trends that we see are disturbing and concerning, there are tangible steps that we can take, resources we can deploy individually and collectively to arrest the rise in hate and extremism here in Michigan, and build true resilience to extremist content and ideologies, particularly with our youth. We will be sharing ways to access these resources, particularly from PERIL, Cynthia's work, the research center that Dr. Miller-Idriss runs in Washington, D.C. At the end of the event, and you can also check out the back flap of your program booklet to connect with me, AG Nessel, and Cynthia's team at PERIL. I want to begin tonight by sharing with you all why this issue has been so important to me and why I wanted to do this event. First, I want you to think about what you saw when you came into the building. You saw several police cars and officers. You walked through metal detectors. You did not receive the address of this event until 2 days ago, and we did not permit walk-ins. All of this for an event featuring 2 elected officials and an outspoken advocate and researcher against hate and extremism. The 2 elected officials are Jewish, gay, and Democrats, held at a large synagogue. It's hard to even say which part of that is the biggest red flag when you're looking at the threat assessment. But the point remains. We took steps to insulate this event due to the very real level of security threats and incidents targeting synagogues, elected officials, Jews, LGBTQ+ people, and more. This is the era that we live in, and why it's important that all of us, not just policymakers, understand the evolving nature of these threats and what actions we as citizens can take to address them. That's why we're here today. Growing up, I attended Sunday school here at Temple Israel, where I learned a lot about Jewish history. I drew one very critical lesson from that education, which is this: Jews have only ever thrived under democracies. And it's not just Jews. History is pretty definitive that democracy, pluralism, and the rule of law are essential conditions for minority groups to survive. When a society is not free, one way or another, the guns of the majority are always inevitably turned on the minorities. Understanding this fact is what first sparked my intense fascination with politics in the first place, as a kid. As I understood it, politics was the biggest determining factor of whether a person could chase their dreams, fulfill their ambitions, and live up to their potential. It seemed so horrifically unfair to me that certain kids in certain places did not have a chance to fulfill their dreams simply because their government didn't like their religion or their skin color or their tribal affiliation in some parts of the world. So began my political career. I became obsessed with learning everything I could about the politics of other countries. In college, I earned my degree in comparative politics and Jewish studies. I worked in DC for several NGOs focused on strengthening democracy in countries abroad. And then one day, the world seemed to stop spinning on its axis. October 27th, 2018. And that date might sound familiar to some of you. I received a news alert on my iPhone, a mass shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, 11 Jews dead, and what would be the deadliest attack in American Jews in history. I remember feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. I felt isolated, disoriented, restless. I wanted to be with the people I loved. Shortly after, I moved back to Michigan. My feeling of restlessness eventually gave way to feeling determined. I felt called, and I wanted to lead. That's when I had the idea to start the Michigan Democratic Jewish Caucus and had the opportunity in doing so to become a leading voice in the fight against anti-Semitism, white supremacy, hate crimes, and extremism in this state. Later, I worked as Director of Communications at the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, where I learned how crimes were actually investigated and prosecuted, and I observed how difficult it could be to issue hate crime charges under Michigan's 1980s era Ethnic Intimidation Act, a law which notably, as Rabbi Jen mentioned, excluded protections for LGBTQ+ people, people with disabilities, seniors, or ethnic groups, all groups which we know have been targeted by hate crimes in Michigan and across the country. In 2021, when I decided against all reasonable logic to run for state representative, I campaigned on a promise to combat hate crimes in Michigan and to strengthen this inadequate law. When I took office in January of 2023, I immediately got to work on 2 pieces of legislation to update and strengthen Michigan's woefully outdated and inadequate hate crime law. I was on a mission to transform Michigan from a national laggard to a national leader in hate crime prevention, intervention, and response. And nothing and no one was going to deter me, although they would certainly do everything they could to try. After months and months of painstaking work, in late April 2023, I stood alongside Attorney General Nessel and I introduced the Michigan Hate Crime Act and the Institutional Desecration Act. Now, this is the point in the story where I could do a dramatic play-by-play of just how excruciating it was to pass these bills over the past 2 years. The interest groups that threatened to oppose the bills if I didn't accommodate all of their nitty-gritty demands. How I was blindsided by a highly organized and well-funded right-wing media disinformation campaign that put the bills on ice for 16 months and sparked a campaign to recall me from office just 6 months into my term. I could tell you about how many times the bills seemed dead one evening only to be resurrected the next morning and then dead again that following afternoon. And that isn't even hyperbole. It happened multiple times. Or the emotionally draining game of whack-a-mole that I had to play as one legislator or another seemed ready to tank the bills. And I bet you'd really be on the edge of your seat if I told you about the unimaginable legislative brinkmanship that I had to engage in, how I held my own against the most powerful people in the state of Michigan and forced them to the negotiating table and finally strong-armed these bills through the state legislature by sheer brute force. But thank you. I appreciate that. But we really don't have time for all of that. So I guess you'll just have to read my memoir one day to get the juicy inside scoop. Suffice to say, after tremendous toil and effort, in December of 2023, the Institutional Desecration Act was signed into law by Governor Whitmer. And in January of this year, the Michigan Hate Crime Act was finally signed into law. Now let's consider, why is this so important? Why should the law separate out hate crimes from other crimes? Isn't a crime, no matter the motive? It's a fair question, and it's one I've received. The answer is this. Hate violence is different from other kinds of violence because it is terroristic in nature. There is never just one victim of a hate crime. An entire community is victimized too. These crimes are usually experienced collectively, which explains my reaction to the Pittsburgh shooting and probably some of yours reactions to that same event. Indeed, hate crimes tell everyone who may be part of a victim's community, people like you aren't welcome. People like you don't belong. And people like you won't be safe. And those who commit hate crimes understand all too well how their actions reverberate across a wider population. In fact, it's exactly what they're counting on: to frighten, intimidate, terrorize. In some cases, the collective anguish can be worse than the crime itself. That's why these strengthened laws are critical. And that's why I'm incredibly proud to have accomplished what I set out to do in my first term, strengthening Michigan's hate crime laws into what I believe is a national gold standard, which is now the basis for legislation being introduced in several other states. Most importantly, I'm very proud to have kept my promise to the people of West Bloomfield, Commerce, and the Lakes. But I'm not just here to take a victory lap. My work and our work is far from over. While our new laws are a necessary first step to ensure Michigan has the required tools to combat hate crimes, they are not a cure-all. Hate is a societal ill and a public health problem, and we need to tackle it as such. And neither new laws or the criminal justice system can fully substitute for that work. They're an important part, but not fully a substitute. Indeed, rooting out hate and extremism from our society and protecting at-risk youth from radicalization requires not just a whole of government effort, but a whole of society effort too. It is incumbent upon each of us, individually and collectively, to cultivate spaces among our families, our friends, our colleagues, our neighbors, where hate has no purchase. Because no matter how much I wish it were otherwise, I cannot write or pass a bill that gets rid of anti-Semitism or anti-Black racism or anti-Asian racism or homophobia or Islamophobia. What we can do is tackle hate when it dovetails with a criminal act. What we can do is improve Michigan's tools to respond, pursue justice and accountability. What we can do is train parents, teachers, coaches, and peers to recognize the signs of radicalization and intervene when necessary. What we can do is fund programs that deter hate and targeted violence in the first place. What we can do is invest in nurturing schools, safe neighborhoods, fulfilling jobs, and meaningful social outlets that provide purpose, belonging, and community to everyone. I will not lie, particularly at this political moment, it is hard not to feel like we are getting further and further away from that vision with each passing day. But no matter how long the odds may seem right now, we cannot concede that vision of a freer, fairer, and more resilient society where everyone has a chance to thrive, no matter where you come from, the color of your skin, the zip code of your home, how you worship, and who you love. That's the world I'm fighting for every day in the State House. And that's the fight that I'm committed to for the long haul. So is AG Nessel. So is Dr. Miller-Idriss. And so, I hope, are you. I am truly grateful to each and every one of you for being here tonight and for your support. And now I'd like to direct you to the video screen. We have a quick video, and then Rabbi Jen will come up here. So.
Hate crime victims in Michigan now have a resource within the Attorney General's office. Dana Nessel has officially launched her new Hate Crimes Unit, which will both investigate and prosecute hate crimes in the state. The department plans to follow up on every credible tip, launch independent investigations, and offer resources to both local and federal law enforcement partners.
I've been in the fight against hate crimes for longer than I've been on the job as Attorney General. In 2016, I created the Fair Michigan Justice Project, which remains a first-of-its-kind task force to investigate and prosecute crimes against the LGBTQ community. When I came into the Department of Attorney General, we found that our department didn't even have one investigator or one prosecutor that was assigned specifically to handle hate crimes. Hate has no place in Michigan.
Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel joining many state lawmakers in support of expanding the state's hate crime law. The proposal on the table would overhaul the ethnic intimidation law that was put in place 35 years ago.
This comes as more hate crimes are reported across the state. Many people hope this new bill will make a difference.
According to a report from a national civil rights group, hate crimes are up more than 80% since 2015.
By enacting this legislation, we can demonstrate that Michigan's justice system will treat hate crimes with the seriousness and severity that they are due.
The four bills include expanding classes that are protected under the law to include those targeted on the basis of sexual and gender minorities, age, disability, ethnicity, and for houses of worship. They also seek to increase penalties for some hate crimes.
Each one of these lawmakers have a deeply personal reason to support the legislation.
My family's former place of worship fell victim to a white supremacist mass shooter.
My brother is in a wheelchair. He was in a car accident a little over 10 years ago, and this past fall he was attacked by someone who just didn't want him in their space.
The FBI notified Arbit and Attorney General Dana Nessel last month that a Michigan man threatened to harm them because they are Jewish.
And as we've seen this rise, our legal architecture to respond to hate crimes remains stuck in 1988.
Our state representative Noah Arbit is very happy that his hate crimes bill has passed the Michigan House. Not easy for a rookie state representative to get any kind of a bill passed.
State Representative Noah Arbit is clapping back at some of his critics over anti-hate crime legislation.
Claims that House Bill 4474 criminalizes misgendering an individual spread widely on conservative sites like Fox News and Breitbart.
Their claims Arbit calls far-right fiction.
The misinformation and lies about this bill, the garbage about misgendering, pronouns, the rest of it, those things aren't hate crimes. They're not even regular crimes. You know what's actually a hate crime? Slashing the throat of a little 7-year-old Arab girl at a park in Detroit. You know what's actually a hate crime? A man assaulting a black postal worker and calling him the worst racial slur you can call someone. You know what's actually a hate crime? 2 boyfriends studying together at the MSU library being jumped by 6 teenagers and assaulted so brutally that they spent 6 hours in the ER, only for the county prosecutor to wave a white flag because Michigan doesn't have the legal provisions to prosecute the case.
Movement in Lansing on a set of 2 bills that would expand Michigan's hate crime law.
The House Committee on Criminal Justice approved the changes along a party line vote.
I think of my time visiting Auschwitz and Treblinka and all the family I lost during the Holocaust. I think of the violent pogroms that drove my great-grandparents to sail halfway across the world to Detroit. I think of the atrocities committed against us on October 7th. I am reminded what I owe to those generations who suffered persecution and violence without any semblance of accountability. All of this is why no misinformation, no lie, no false attack will ever make me concede this fight. Pass this bill. Pass this bill, Madam Speaker. Help protect not only my district, but every community across Michigan. It is time to stop playing politics with the safety of our communities. Enough. Let's vote.
Thank you, Representative Arbit. It's now my pleasure to introduce Attorney General Dana Nessel. A former criminal prosecutor and civil rights attorney, Dana Nessel is now serving her second term as Michigan's 54th Attorney General. Throughout her tenure, AG Nessel has been a staunch advocate for crime victims' rights, earning both the LACASA Center Changemaker Award and the Children's Advocacy Centers of Michigan Champion of Justice Award in recognition of her work. Upon taking office, AG Nessel launched the first state attorney general's Hate Crimes and Domestic Terrorism unit in the country. And here to tell us about her department's efforts to protect public safety, please welcome Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. Thank you.
All right, great, fantastic. Thank you so much. Looking at those videos, I can say one thing very definitively, and that's, Noah, you have aged better than I have, for sure. There's no question about it. So good evening, everybody. Thanks again to Rep. Arbit for inviting me to participate. Thank you to Rabbi Kaluzny Temple Israel for hosting this event. And thank you so much to Dr. Miller-Idriss for traveling all the way to Michigan and having a talk with us, telling us about her research, incredibly important for us to be working on in this time, in this space, to make sure that we're working together to tackle the mounting issues of violent extremism, certainly dividing our communities. I will say this to follow up on some of the things that Noah talked about. Yeah, I could not believe how hard it was for him to get these bills passed. They just seem like no-brainers to me. And, you know, you run for these offices to have some sense of agency, and so that you can be in the room where it happens, but then you get in that room and it's like an escape room, and you can't wait to claw your way out. So it is not an exaggeration to say that Noah made a lot of enemies in Lansing trying to get these bills through, because he was so doggedly determined to make sure that it happened. And somehow, Noah, you did it. So honestly, not just, I don't just thank you, because I personally believe it's the right thing. I thank you as the top law enforcement official of this state for, at long last, giving us at least some tools in our toolbox to actually hold people accountable properly when they commit these very heinous and disturbing types of crimes that we otherwise had very little that we could do about anything about. And an interesting point I want to make about that as well is that when the original Ethnic Intimidation Act was passed some 35 years ago, not very strong, better than what we had, but still not great, it was co-sponsored by, flaming left-wing radicals such as John Engler and Connie Binsfeld, if you remember her. I mean, these were conservative Republicans that supported these bills. But then 35 years later, could barely find any Republicans at all. And then you had all these issues with Democrats as well. I mean, it was insane that something so simple as protecting people from being the victim of hate crimes could be so controversial. And yet, it is now, for some reason. As the state's top law enforcement official, I did try to make it a point, having handled so many of these types of incidences as a prosecutor, having represented people who committed those crimes as a defense attorney, working with that organization I talked about that focused on investigating and then also prosecuting, working with local prosecutors to prosecute hate crimes. I mean, there was a significant need for it. And we know, of course, the numbers showed that an exponential rise in hate crimes of all sorts, but especially especially in anti-Semitic incidents. Some 400% increase, I believe, was found in 2023 from from the previous year alone. I mean, it's just insane numbers. Michigan seeing over 250 reported incidents of hate crimes in a single year. And important to note that those numbers are so low compared to the actual number of hate crimes, because these are some of the most underreported types of crimes that we have. You know, it's just so unlikely that anybody even reports a hate crime, let alone that the case ultimately ends up moving forward to prosecution, let alone that somebody is convicted of it. But you know, we know the impact of these types of crimes. We know how intensely personal and targeted they make a person feel, even if you are not the individual who was actually targeted, because these crimes target not people as much as they target communities of people. And 50% of hate crimes occur at homes and residences. Another quarter occurred in public spaces like highways, roads, sidewalks. Important to remember that hate bias incidents are driven by various forms of prejudice, of course, and whether that be race, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability status, it benefits us all to rally for stronger protections to keep every Michigan resident safer in the long run. And I am going to say this from experience, people who commit hate crimes don't just commit hate crimes. And I say that because I've seen time and time again where you have a hate crime that went unsolved until later on you found that person had committed a crime, a very assaultive crime, sometimes a murder against someone else. And so it behooves us all to take these cases very, very seriously. 4 out of 5 reported hate crimes in Michigan targeted not property, not institutions, but people. So what is a hate crime? Well, a hate crime is defined as a criminal act committed against a person, group, or their property motivated by prejudice or bias against protected characteristics. And hate crimes are distinguished from other types of crimes by the underlying bias or prejudice that motivates the perpetrator, but they're much more than, again, just the individual or just the building that they target. They're about sowing these tensions and striking fear into the hearts of an entire community, and they are messaging crimes that must be answered with a strong message in return, and that is this: hate has no place in Michigan, and we won't tolerate that. So right away, within the first couple months of taking office in 2019, I created the Department of Attorney General Hate Crime and Domestic Terrorism Unit, dedicated to investigating and prosecuting bias-motivated crimes, and it was the first of its kind in the nation, I'm proud to say. Not without pushback. Do you know that right away after I announced it, I was asked to testify before a Senate Oversight Committee to question why I would put such a unit together. And I wish we had a whole video on that everybody could watch, but I just couldn't believe, frankly, the ignorance of the senators who sat on that committee. And I literally had, I'll never forget this, I had a senator say to me, so what, you just hate someone and now all of a sudden you go to prison? And I was like, man, have you never seen Law and Order or anything? Like, no, that's not how this works. Like, you have to commit an actual crime. You can't just hate someone. That hate has to be translated into an act, a bias-oriented act, and that could be against an individual, an assault. It could be malicious destruction of property. It could be threats. It could be many other things. But you know, then you get, like, there's this thing called trial, maybe you've heard of, and jurors sit and they listen to evidence and you have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And, you know, I mean, it was astonishing to me. No offense to any of your colleagues, Noah, But I mean, just the ignorance about it and the pushback that I got and the lawsuits. We're still litigating whether I'm legally allowed to have a hate crimes and domestic terrorism unit at the Department of Attorney General. And that's not a joke. That's being litigated in the Western District of Michigan right now as we speak. And, you know, in addition to why it's so important to have both hate crimes and domestic terrorism, I think it's important that everybody know. First of all, guess how many federal laws there are that protect us against domestic terrorism? None. They can only prosecute foreign terrorism, not domestic terrorism. But we do have those laws in Michigan, thankfully, and we utilize them when we have those types of crimes that are committed. And in terms of hate crimes, yes, there is a hate crime statute under federal law, but there are very narrow circumstances under which it can be charged, and it's not, unfortunately, in most cases, nearly as strong as what we have now under state law. So it's incredibly important that we have a state agency and state law that can prosecute, that these cases can be prosecuted under. So we work together. Well, all right, I'm gonna have to walk this back a little bit. Normally I say our hate crimes unit works with federal and local law enforcement partners to ensure crimes of this nature are thoroughly investigated. So not the federal part, not so much anymore, sadly, because the federal government used to prioritize domestic terrorism, and now it's like we don't have, like domestic terrorism just went away overnight, according to the FBI. And I don't think that we're gonna get much in the way of cooperation anymore. So I'm gonna say our hate crimes unit works with Michigan State Police and local law enforcement and counties, and I guess TBD on whether the feds will provide any assistance to us. You might have seen that there were hearings actually today on the defunding of the FBI when it comes to a variety of type of work that they traditionally do. But back in the old days, before now, you know, we worked together on a lot of cases, including cases involving anti-government militia groups, white supremacy organizations, and we actually have some people right now that are on you know, a handful of cases that are taking a time out right now in the Michigan Department of Corrections because of some of the threats of violence and the training with firearms that occurred in various areas of the state. You know, had we not intervened in some of these cases, I don't know that you don't have incidences where you have a black church in Detroit or a place like Temple Israel that, you know, you have a mass incident of violence had we not worked with our federal partners and our state and county partners to intervene and to prosecute those wrongdoers. And I will say this, when we talk about prosecuting hate crimes, to me, the way I see it is we call it in our office murder prevention. Because if you can start when you have a lower level offense, right? You have a simple assault, not an aggravated assault, not necessarily an assault with intent to murder, but a low level assault, or when it starts with a property related crime, you have the ability to intervene at that point and hopefully get this person under the jurisdiction of the court, get them mental health treatment if they require that, and most of the offenders do require mental health treatment, the people who commit these crimes. And hopefully you're able to intervene in a way that you prevent them from going on and committing mass murders. And that's why prosecuting these cases is so incredibly important. In terms of reporting it, I think it's really important to say this. If you or someone you know is a victim of a hate crime, please report it to local law enforcement and contact us at the Department of Attorney General, and that's at hatecrimes@michigan.gov. And we respond to every single email that we receive, phone call we receive, and we investigate all the cases. So what is a civil rights violation? Well, in some instances, bias motivated conduct may not necessarily be criminal, but it could still constitute a civil rights violation. And that applies to any act or conduct that unlawfully deprives an individual or a group of their rights and privileges guaranteed under law. And one thing that you can do if you encounter this is file a complaint online with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, and you can call them, you can contact them by email as well. What is a hate incident? Well, I do again want to be clear, if the Senate Oversight Committee didn't hear me, hate itself is not a crime, and our civil liberties, First Amendment, protects our right to speak out about even the most horrific, terrible, heinous things. A hate incident is an action, behavior, or speech that expresses prejudice, bias, or hostility against a person or a group based on their protected characteristics, but it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of criminal activity. So hate incidents might involve offensive comments, gestures, other non-criminal behaviors. But when a criminal offense is committed against a person or property and it's motivated by an offender's bias against a particular group, then my office can take action under the law. So some tips on reporting. Your first priority, of course, should be to ensure the safety of the people that are with you. So if you find yourself in immediate danger, call 911, call local law enforcement in an emergency situation. But secondly, make sure that you're doing what you can to preserve any evidence for law enforcement to investigate when they get to the scene, and try to document as much as you can. And that might mean, we all have our trusty cell phones now, so please take pictures, take videos if you can, and no matter what, please don't tamper with the crime scene. Very, very important. Immediately have someone file a police report and contact, again, the AG's Hate Crimes Unit. In the event that you have something related to institutional desecration, again, bills that Noah Arbit got passed. For a long time in Michigan, prosecutors really didn't have the tools to hold perpetrators properly accountable because there's, malicious destruction of property, which could be honestly just, somebody like taking your mailbox out, because they're mad at you or something, but that's very different, right? That's very different from somebody who is spray painting a swastika on a temple. Like, those are not the same things, but the law really kind of treated it the same. Crimes against real property were real property no matter what it was. Crimes against personal property were crimes against personal property. You couldn't distinguish these very much. But the Institutional Desecration Act really is helpful. And, when you have someplace like a temple or a church, or you have a nonprofit, for instance, or you have a facility and there is some sort of particular bias, including all of the different subsects and classes that you're saying, when it's based on that, instead of it being sometimes a 93-day offense, just a throwaway misdemeanor, it is actually now potentially a 10-year felony. So the law now takes this very, very seriously, and it never did before. In terms of the new Hate Crimes Act, now again, this used to be the Ethnic Intimidation Act. It was treated as either a high-level misdemeanor or the lowest level felony, but it also did not include many different classes of people. And as you heard from Noah, this was expanded, and the new Hate Crimes Act that became effective on April 2nd of this year expanded the definition. So it includes now sexual orientation, gender identity, age, disability, so forth. But what it allows is this to be treated like a felony. And also to have sort of escalating penalties depending on if there are different types of more dangerous behavior involved. For instance, if you have an adult that targets a child, that should be considered more egregious, right? If you have a group of people who target an individual instead of a one-on-one situation, that's considered to be more serious. If you have a weapon involved, or of course a firearm involved, that's considered to be more serious. And now we can treat these cases as though they are true felonies. We can habitualize them, we can add felony firearm if we need to, And it just involves many more protections than we used to have before Noah was able to get that passed. I want to sort of close out a little bit on talking again about reporting these crimes and how important it is. I am going to say this. You know, we come from different walks of life. We come from different political persuasions. But I don't appreciate how the Trump administration has been trying to justify the elimination of people's academic rights and civil liberties under the guise of combating anti-Semitism. I don't think he's making it better. I think he's making it worse. And that is a deep concern that I have, and I think it's actually aiding and abetting in the rise of anti-Semitism, because now Jews get blamed for everything, including some of the very illegal and I would say unconstitutional actions of the Trump administration. Now that's our fault too. So I just will say that, you know, history teaches us that authoritarian regimes don't always come out guns a-blazing, although it feels like that's the case happening right now. But their MO more is to chip away at the protections of marginalized communities and scapegoat them before applying those strictures to the rest of the population. And the same people who choose to belittle and threaten one class of people based on their identity are not likely to look kindly on any other marginalized group of people who call Michigan home. So I just truly believe that the American Jewish community cannot allow Donald Trump and his administration to co-opt our name, upend our values, strip us of our civil liberties, and then pretend he's doing us a favor. Now is the time for us to band together, and we are not without power or resources. Again, my department's hate crimes unit stands at the ready to protect each and every resident of this state. And you can help us out by telling your families, your friends, your neighbors about how to contact us should they ever have that need. Please just know that you have a partner at the Michigan Department of Attorney General. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Nessel. It's my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Cynthia Miller-Idriss. Dr. Miller-Idriss is a leading scholar in the study of extremism, radicalization, and polarization, whose work bridges academic research and practical interventions. As the director of the Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab, known as PERIL, at American University, her research informs policy, media, and community-based strategies to address pressing global challenges. Her publications and contributions offer critical insights into understanding and preventing the dynamics of hate and violence. Dr. Miller-Idriss.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Temple Israel, for hosting us, Representative Arbit, for organizing this for years. I know we've been talking about an event like this, and Attorney General Nessel, I've been a big fan for a long time. It's such an honor to be here. And I want to thank the security staff and law enforcement also for keeping us safe, and all of you for coming. I also want to acknowledge a couple of my staff who are here with me, Rabbi Seth Limmer, who's now our Director of Public Affairs, and Bryce Kobe, our Michigan-based team member. My role, I know, here today is to leave you with a little more optimism and a little more hope, and I'm going to do that by talking about what we do in the prevention space to create tools for what we call primary prevention, which is how to educate communities, parents, caregivers, mental health counselors, faith leaders, coaches, anyone who especially is in the life of a young person. Grandparents play a really big role with the tools to better recognize and make early interventions that can off-ramp young people before they get to violence, that can get them to recognize and reject manipulative tactics online, and that also directly intervene in media literacy and digital literacy to help them to help individuals directly recognize and reject, including through animated videos for kids aged kindergarten through 6th grade, many of which are being tested right now in this district in, I think, 16 schools and classrooms, and in the kind of direct interventions on anti-Semitism that I'll talk about in terms of our evidence. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the pathways first. I promise not to be too professory about it, but just to bring us all up to the same speed, to tell you a little bit about some of the barriers to doing this work, including some of the vulnerabilities that we're facing. So right now we have a series of, maybe we could advance one slide forward there to tell you that the lab itself aims to strengthen community resilience, which is a method of preventing violent extremism that I should say probably first comes from the first 15 years of my career, where after getting my doctorate right here in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, I went to Germany and studied school-based responses to resurgent anti-Semitism and hate, where 95% of the 3 billion euro that Germans invest in prevention goes into primary prevention, which is early media digital literacy to prevent people from being persuaded by anti-Semitism and other forms of racism and hate. And I thought I was a comparative education professor. I wrote 2 books on that issue. I became an accidental expert in how young people communicate online to share hate through memes and other forms of kind of rabbit holes. And then when Charlottesville happened here in the US, I started getting asked to explain this in the American context. And that's when I created the lab. So if we could advance the slide. One of the things, I'm not going to go through all of the text here, but just to say we are in a perfect storm in which we have a more favorable environment to enabling harm, so loss of trust in institutions, a kind of crisis of loneliness. We have the most recent data that we have shows that 50% of American men say their online lives are more rewarding than their offline lives, for example. 25% of men under 30 say they don't have a single friend. So we have weak protective factors, a lack of training about what's happening online, and a very quickly evolving threat landscape that keeps moving and that keeps creating new hybrid forms. We can advance that slide as well. But we also know that everyone wants to feel safe, that everyone wants to feel better equipped, parents in particular, with ways to protect their children against online harms. We find that that parents are the most nonpartisan group we work with. They come to the table ready to understand, and that we need resources. And so one of the things we've been doing right here in Michigan is testing a model that Germans have, which is a kind of, it's called a mobile advisory center, a clinic, if you will, that is not unlike an eating disorder clinic or the kind of resource that you might be able to send a kid to if there was an addiction issue or some other kind of problem, except now we have resources for what happens when someone is exhibiting signs of hate or radicalization or exposure to harmful content online. We can advance that. So if you just look at this model, the way the US has approached this is really through very important and essential ways, as we've heard tonight. I wouldn't suggest taking any of that away, but with most of our efforts in a kind of secondary and tertiary, trying to stop an already radicalized person from doing harm. I once heard a very senior official in the Biden administration explain this as, it's not his job to stop someone from becoming radicalized, it's his job to stop the radicalized person from picking up a gun, okay? So I understand that logic in terms of free speech, but I also want us to have a better standard than just how do we barricade the doors more effectively as our measure of success. And so we think that there has to be more civil society, educational, community-based efforts, often funded, in our case, fully by philanthropic sectors and local communities at the primary level. So we can skip forward. So that's an effort to minimize the risk of radicalization while we urge still protecting free speech, right? So our effort argues that, you know, when we shifted from approaches to treating cardiac disease and diabetes, for example, to not just treating the disease once it manifested, but to understanding you can educate communities about healthier eating habits and exercise habits that could reduce the incidence of disease, We're not telling people that they have to do those things, but we're educating people about how they can do those things. And that's the same thing here. How can you stay safer online while still protecting people's choice to consume whatever media they want? So we can move forward. We can skip that one and just move forward again, one more after that. Because what I really want to focus on are the tools. The tools are all free, so we get funders to pay for our tools, we test them with evidence, and then we release them to the public. So you'll have our website and everything available. Representative Arbit came to one of our trainings in the VEER program, which is our video-based pre-bunking work. That is a direct short-form video that are used in social media and in online advertisements and pre-roll videos that teach people about the manipulative tactics in as short as 30 seconds so that they recognize and reject propaganda. And I'll tell you at the end a little bit about our series of videos, Preventing Antisemitism, which we did this year, including one of the videos that had a 24% increase in college students' willingness to argue against someone who said something anti-Semitic. So that's the biggest effect we've ever had. But we tested 4 videos and one of them didn't work. So one of the things you have to test is, effectiveness before you release to the public. We have what we call our care centers, which are community advisory, resource, and education centers in 2 pilots that are 2 years long, one right here in Michigan and one in Georgia. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And then a number of toolkits and guides and resources, training programs, and probably my personal favorite that I know you also love is the DUCK program that I just mentioned, our animated video series and curriculum for elementary school students. Part of why I love that is because it was originally created by my undergrads who then went after a federal grant and won $800,000 to run that program in our lab. They understand younger kids better than anyone and designed a curriculum and then hired real animators, real curriculum experts, and are out there getting it into schools across Michigan and in Connecticut right now, testing it before we release it fully to the public again for free. We can move forward. So just to say the purpose of those toolkits is to teach people about red flags and warning signs of extremism and harmful online content, including things that are really hard for parents and teachers to understand, how technology facilitates these things like apps, one called a calculator vault that you may know hides other apps behind it on your teen's phone. So there are things like that we teach parents about, and we teach them also strategies to advise and interrupt. We can scoop forward. So one of the things we do is study because we're academics. So we have followed 1,500 parents and caregivers, meaning residential caregivers, often grandparents who are living with young people, to see what they learned. This was our first guide, which we did in conjunction with the Southern Poverty Law Center to online radicalization during COVID. And one of the things we found is that within 3 months, 6% of parents, which was 75 parents, said they directly used what they learned to intervene with a young person who they now understood was exposed to harmful content. 12% by the end of the year said that they either formed or joined a group of other parents to talk about the online harms their kids were experiencing. And we found that they remembered what they learned for 6 months, but they forgot it after that, but they remained confident for 3 more months that they could intervene effectively. So we went back to the funder and said, we could use a booster around 6 months to let them know, remind them what they learned. So we then expanded that into a tool for coaches, teachers, mental health counselors, school counselors, faith leaders, and others. And again, found it takes just in this case about 12 minutes to read, and high satisfaction and high understanding of how to engage. We also found that adults tend to engage the most with a young person in the car. So that's the place where they feel the most confident talking to teenagers, which makes sense in carpools and the fact that you don't have to make eye contact. So you can scooch forward. And let's just drop down. There's going to be a bunch of those. You can go all the way through it. Yes, thank you. So one of the things that I just want to tell you about our pilot here in Michigan, which comes to an end at the end of June, and then we'll have evidence as we expand it into other new ways of doing this, is that we have learned that people really need these resources. Bryce is here, our only staffer on the ground in Michigan, is constantly busy responding to requests from schools, from faith leaders, from libraries, from others, providing workshops, trainings, having some of our staff come out from DC and also from Chicago, where our Director of Public Affairs lives, and that we need responses to support victim survivors of hate and not just perpetrators. And one of the things we've learned is that we also need resources for people who live in hybrid spaces, meaning we just released a whole series of tools for Hispanic serving institutions, and we're doing one now for HBCUs, where you have students and faculty who are often victims of hate, but also expressing anti-Semitism or misogyny, and we need sort of very nuanced ways of addressing that. We can skip forward, and I'll maybe one more, I'll close with talking about our videos, which we're really proud of because it's taken us several years to kind of refine the formula of these pre-bunking videos. And our anti-Semitism prevention videos this year, which are about to get released to the public, have produced the greatest effect yet in videos that are just about a minute long. That in this case, we do a massive code booking and mapping process to see which propaganda narratives are the most salient and emergent. This past year, no surprise, all of those anti-Semitic narratives at the very top were sort of narratives that are circulating among college campuses, among young people. And so they dealt a lot with post-October 7th issues. If we had had more funding, we would have gone further down the list and gotten to some of those more traditional far-right anti-Semitic narratives. It's not that they went away, it's just that there were other ones moving more quickly. And so our videos focused a lot on issues like anti-Semitism that is linked to ideas about Hamas being a force of liberation, or anti-Semitism that uses critique against Israel to cloak critique of Jews. And one of the things we found is that this huge percentage of likelihood to challenge anti-Semitic content when they heard it came from just a minute and 15-second video. We had a 19.4% increase in what's called protective disgust response, meaning young people felt more disgusted by the anti-Semitic content after watching the video, which is a protective feeling that has come from biological responses to pathogens, right? So it's a really important thing that causes you to reject something and not want to be around it. And we found an 18% improvement in recognizing how manipulation works in propaganda. So we're really proud of these videos. We're now mapping we had renewal funding and mapped it for a second year, and we're about to start scripting new sets of videos. And I will say one of the things we learned is that anti-Semitic propaganda is often intertwined with misogynistic and anti-feminist propaganda, and around birth rates, the Great Replacement, for example, and that the anti-feminist content is often a gateway to the anti-Semitic content, because there's so many young boys who are attracted to figures like Andrew Tate, who are offering them success strategies for dating and others, and then find the anti-Semitic content through that. So we've now launched a new division on preventing gendered violence that is addressing this intersection in part of misogyny, gender-based violence, anti-LGBTQ issues, and anti-Semitism. And so next year we'll have a new round of videos that does some of that. So all of that's to say, I know it's a lot, it's overwhelming, but we can jump to the last slide, which I think gives you our email address and a way to contact us, right? Our website, perilresearch.com, is the place where you can find all of these tools for free, evidence and reports, and at perilamerican.edu, you can ask us for trainings or any other assistance and help that you need. And it's on the booklet as well. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miller-Idriss. I urge you to look at the website. I took a deep dive, and they actually talk about inoculation against hate, almost like a vaccine. It's fascinating. Please, please look at their work. At this moment, if you do have a question, if you wrote down a question, please kind of go like this. And I believe we have someone who's going to come and collect the cards. But for the moment, while we are collecting, I have some questions that I would like to direct towards our panelists. So Dr. Miller-Idriss, I think you touched on the misogyny at the end, but I think that the statistic that you talked about, that most men under 30 don't think they have friends, and that leads to hate, which can lead to anti-Semitism. What is happening in the manosphere of Andrew Tate and what is happening online with men?
Well, thank you for that question. I mean, one of the things that's happening is that we have to acknowledge there is a very real crisis, if you will, of men and boys, both on the loneliness front and on the fact that men have 3/4 of the deaths of despair right now, which are suicides, overdoses, and alcohol-fueled deaths, as well as now only 40% of college graduation rates nationally. And so they're not doing as well on labor market outcomes either. And what happens online is they're provided with scapegoats for why their lives are not doing that well, and with strategies to improve them, which in the case of influencers like Andrew Tate often involve physical abuse and exploitation of women in order to get success, anti-Semitism that blames Jews for the plight that you find yourself in, and really strategies that urge control over women's bodies. So there was a 4,600% increase after the election in online phrases like, your body, my choice. I had parents write to me and say that their daughters, a 13-year-old in a middle school, was told to go put on her handmaid's dress. College freshman had her body grabbed, her rear end grabbed by someone in a coffee shop, and when she turned around to look at the stranger, he said, "We can do that now." And so there was this kind of moment, particularly in that period, of a resurgence of kind of power and misogyny, and then it gets very easily linked to other forms of hate.
Representative Arbit, I would like to ask you, what is the role of state lawmakers in building resilience to hate and extremism? And what were the biggest challenges, we heard about some of them, that you face passing your legislations, and what do you think the next steps are?
Well, one of the things that I think is really important is building connections and networks, and that's why I'm really excited to partner with PERIL and see what we can do to distribute a lot of PERIL's resources to our communities and to communities across the state. We're in Lansing today. I was at the state capitol, and we did a lunch and learn, and we were hoping to get other legislators to go and implement this work in their own communities, as well as I have in West Bloomfield. But I do want to take a moment to say something that I think, on the second point of the question, I think is really important. Part of the reason why the bills that we ended up passing, why they had so much trouble passing, is that in the beginning, when I was introducing the bill, you have messaging around the bill, like, what is the story you're telling about the bill? And I was very cognizant that I was coming to this as a Jewish legislator, as a gay legislator, as a Jew and a gay person, representing a very diverse community, and also trying to write legislation on behalf of the entire state, who are more than just Jews and more than just gay people. And I wanted people to understand that, yes, I was coming to this from a unique perspective of, like, I care that there are anti-Semitic hate crimes, I care that there are homophobic hate crimes, but I also care about anti-Black racism. I also care about Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism and crimes committed against Latinos and Hispanics and Asians, right? I care about everyone, and everyone is going to benefit from this bill. People with disabilities, even seniors who are targeted. And that was so important to me, that everyone understood that this wasn't just about the communities that I'm part of, but the communities that I represent, and even the communities that maybe don't live disproportionately in greater West Bloomfield, but are in other parts of the state. It was really important to me. So I led with the fact that this was going to help everyone. And what I very quickly learned, I learned a lesson in communications. When something is about everything, it's really about nothing. But I want you to understand why I made that choice. I didn't want people to pigeonhole the bill as, oh, it's just a Jew who's looking out for another Jew. But even if it was, what's wrong with that? And so I want to communicate to you the psychic burden. I've heard this phrase a lot as someone in public office, the burden of representation, the burden of representation. And what does that mean? when it comes to being a minority in public office. You often hear this with like black elected officials talking about bearing the burden of being the first of something, whether you're breaking the glass ceiling, whatever it is, the burden of representation. I have to constantly do a calculation in my mind, because there are only 2 Jews in the state house and 1 Jew in the state senate. I have to, and I represent a community that is 20% Jewish, but it has a lot of diversity, and that's really important to me. But I have to do this constant calculation. If I'm the only one speaking out about anti-Semitism, are all of my other constituents going to be thinking that I don't look out for them just as much as I look out for the Jewish community? And so I have to constantly do this calculation. When am I speaking out too much, and who's going to think this way about what I say, and are other people going to be alienated because I want them to know I care about them too? And I didn't get it right, and it ended up, the bill ended up because I said, no, I want everyone to know that this is about them too, and I want everyone to see themselves reflected in this bill. I want them to see themselves reflected in my representation of this bill. It ended up being about nothing, and then who decided what it was about? The opposition decided what it was about. And they told everyone that it was about, you probably heard it. I had constituents come up to me who voted for me, who supported me, who donated to my campaign, saying to me, Noah, what the hell are you doing? Why are you trying to send people in prison for 10 years for misgendering someone? I don't always know if someone, who may be part of the transgender community, I don't always know, what to say or what to do, what the right thing is, and you want to send me to prison? That's not what the bill was about. That was never in the bill. That was not what it said. That was not what it did, but they lied. And they were effective. It was so effective, the governor of Texas tweeted about the bill. It got onto Fox News. It even got into the UK Daily Mail. It made international news. And to the point where it got so toxic that the state Senate refused to take up the bill. And that's why it got on ice for 60 months. And then they tried to recall me from office. And so the point in answering all of this is I think it's really important that when we look at our elected officials and try to read into the things that they say versus the things that they don't say, ask questions. Don't just assume things, because I always have to do this mental calculation of and it is complex, and it's part of the job of how do I make sure that everyone feels that I'm fighting for them? And as someone who represents or is part of 2 distinct communities, as Dana and I and Jeremy Moss are 3 people who understand that pretty well. It can be really tricky, and I'm not sure what the takeaway from that is. I think it's actually a pretty dispiriting takeaway, because I really tried to get everyone to see themselves in that. But I think I shouldn't have to do that mental calculation. I should be able to say the things that I want to say about my communities, and say the things I want to say about other communities, and no one feel like I am, saying too much about this or too little about that. And I also think it speaks to the importance of allies. I can't be the only one talking about anti-Semitism. And that leaves me space where I don't always have to be the one talking about it, where I can talk about other things that matter to other people. I can't always be the one doing it. Dana can't always be the one taking the burden on these things. We need allies. And so if I'm not your representative, if someone else is your representative, talk to them, tell them, ask them, speak up. Because we need more than just the Jews to speak out about Jewish issues. We need more than just the black representatives to speak out about black issues. We all need to have each other's backs. That's the only way that we're going to move forward and have each other and protect each other in this time, right? Is if we all have each other's backs.
It is dispiriting to think that legislation against hate saw backlash and pressure against it, but here we are. Dr. Miller-Idriss, much of your work focuses on youth radicalization. What do you think draws young people towards hate and extremism today? And are there warning signs? Are there things that we can look for as parents and in teachers, and so we can intervene effectively?
Great question. I think there are sort of 3 things we're very worried about in the lab right now. And one has been going on for a long time, which is the emotional appeal of what extremist groups offer, which is often positive in a strange way. They offer a sense of purpose, belonging, a way to enact meaning, where young people don't have spaces where they feel those things. You often hear young men talk about there being a brotherhood where they felt connected and a part of something. And so, that's something that draws young people in. A second is that there's been a weaponization of youth culture over the last decade or so in online spaces that make use a lot of humor and satire and irony to make it seem like everything is just a joke, and that critics are just, kind of triggered snowflakes who can't take that joke. And it's been a very effective way of using memes, of desensitizing and dehumanizing people, but making it seem like it's sort of fun and snarky and edgy and even countercultural, if you will. And so that's been something that's hard to counter with just sincere adult, what kids often describe as sanctimoniousness or preachiness on the part of teachers or adults. And so finding ways to meet them where they are and talk to them about online spaces is really important. And then I think the thing I'm worried about most after spending a lot of my semester in high schools and middle schools right now is the sheer amount of violent content that's coming across kids' feeds. It's off the charts. It's like nothing I've seen before, and I've been in this field for a long time. There was an episode on February 26th that kids have talked to me about now in 3 high schools and in a college setting, where Instagram had an algorithmic error that led teenagers' feeds to be flooded with extremely violent content for 24 hours, live stream suicides and murders and child abuse and animal abuse. And Meta issued an apology the next day for the error that led some users' feeds to have some extremely violent content, but there was no mitigation, no help. They didn't inform teachers or parents. And in each of those cases where I've talked to kids about it, not a single adult knew about it in the room. No teachers, no parents. Only 2 kids in all of those hundreds of kids said they told anybody about it. And in some cases, they didn't tell anyone because they were ashamed about what they saw on their own feeds because they thought it was their fault. They had hovered over another video too long, the algorithm, they were embarrassed that somebody else might have seen it. In other cases, they knew they weren't supposed to have their phones out at school, and so they saw something and they didn't feel they could report it. So when I talk to kids about what they feel and what they're feeling about that, they say they feel numb, they feel apathetic. So the extreme desensitization that's happening in a way that's almost like chronic trauma, PTSD, from seeing horrific things in an unexpected way, but in a regular way on their phones. I really worry about what we're seeing now. And, just yesterday, the FBI, a day before yesterday, announced that they have 250 open investigations into exploitative forms of extremism that are targeting kids to do harmful things in all 55 of their jurisdictions. So right here in Michigan, too, they're called 764 networks. I won't get into it, but they're awful. And those are the kinds of things that we worry a lot about. Violent exposure, emotional impulses, and the use of humor, I think, are the 3 biggest concerns right now.
I have to say, as a parent of 2 teens, there is no way to prepare parents to make sure our kids are okay in real life and also make sure they're okay in their virtual lives. And you can have all the parental controls in the world and you see what happens. It's a very, very scary reality. I'm going to ask for the cards from the audience. If someone can bring them up to me, we'll take a couple more minutes on those cards. Can you tell us, Dr. Miller-Idriss, you said one of your pilots is in Michigan. What have they been up to?
Yes, Bryce right here is our staffer in Michigan. So our care centers and care staff, which are community advisory, resource and education team members, we see their job essentially as a conduit to get our tools into the hands of local communities. So Bryce is a human distribution mechanism, if you will, for our tools, and really does a lot of networking, responding to inquiries, getting out and helping doing trainings. Often these inquiries come in when there's a crisis already. And so we're hoping to get the word out more in a preventative capacity as we move forward so that people know we're there before there's a crisis. But really it's anyone who needs help. There's a full-time person here in Michigan to provide help and to help faith leaders or teachers or mental health counselors or parents or anybody who has somebody they're worried about in their life know how to get those resources and get more help.
It's such a fabulous program. I really hope that it takes and is spread. Talk about something good going viral. That would be wonderful. I've just read a couple of these questions. They're all fabulous. Unfortunately, we will not get through all of them. I apologize. This one says, in the last few days, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the ban against transgender service in the military. I believe this is to AG Nessel. Could you explain the basis that this was used, because this would be discrimination? And please.
So the basis, I believe, is totally just bias and nothing more than that. But I will say the case is not over. What the Supreme Court ruled on, they didn't rule on the underlying facts of the case and the underlying law. It was in regard to whether or not they would permit the stay to continue. So the Trump administration essentially indicated they were going to ban all transgender people from serving in the military. And what was interesting about it was that there was no claim made that trans people serving in the military affected military readiness. There was no claim made that these service members were not serving their country admirably, or that they were ineffective in their jobs in any way, shape, or form and could not effectively serve in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, so forth. It was just, I mean, there was uncontested facts. So there were multiple different parties that sued to stop that, to stop the ban from going into effect and to stop this policy from taking into effect. And the district court judge agreed, said, there's no immediate harm to the government if they're not allowed to start this ban and to kick all these people out of their job, their work serving the military, but that there would be an immediate harm to the trans people that would be kicked out of their jobs, and also to the military itself, really, because these people, a lot of time, effort, energy, money goes into training people to serve in the military. So the district court said, nope, while this whole thing plays out, trans people will continue to be able to serve. The Court of Appeals said the same thing, but then when it got to the Supreme Court, they were like, nope, you could start that plan immediately, but didn't say why. There's no written opinion to go along with that. And it was a 6-3 decision, so the Republican appointees voted to allow the ban to immediately go into effect. The Democratic appointees voted against it. I am going to say this. I am deeply worried about the precedent that this sets. Now, many of you know that I was involved in the Obergefell case, which is the same-sex marriage case back in 2015. And what the court decided at that time was that bias and discrimination was not a proper reason for the government to take a certain action or to pass a certain law or have that law stay in effect. That would be unconstitutional and illegal if it was just based on bias or discrimination. You had to have a rational basis for it. Well, and then they said that there was no rational basis to make same-sex marriages illegal because it didn't help people in any way. The state wasn't a stronger place. You couldn't point to anybody where you could say, well, that person is better off because no same-sex marriages. But you could point to a whole lot of people who you could say were worse off. So that was the ruling then, but now that the Supreme Court is saying, wait a minute, even though the Department of Justice is not even trying to suggest that there is some other reason that affects again, the capability of our military to defend our country, there's no reason that is put forth at all. And basically a stipulation to the facts that they don't have a reason for it. They just don't want people who have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria from serving in the military, even though they can't say how that affects the ability of the military to do its job. So this is scary for people who care about our government not discriminating against certain disfavored minorities in our country. And as we have said many, many times, we have all said it, that, first they came for the trans people, then they came for the immigrants. How far behind do you think are Jewish Americans?
Thank you so much. We only have a couple minutes left, so these are gonna have to be quick answers, my friends. Representative Arbit, you did get pushback couple minutes, 2 minutes, Representative Arbit. You did get pushback from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle about your bill. Was it more than political, or did it just feel very much a dig in your heels political party argument? And how do you overcome that in 2 minutes?
Well, here's what really bothered me. Some of the people across the aisle came with me on a bipartisan delegation to the Ziegelman Holocaust Memorial Center. After October 7th, the entire Republican side of the aisle put Israeli flags on their desks. And I remember at the Ziegelman Holocaust, a lot of them were in tears, and I was irate because they had all voted en masse against my bill. And I actually, to the women, I went up to the Republican women and I said, you think about this place the next time that my hate crime bill comes up on the board, because God knows I will make sure it comes up on the board again. Mark my words, it will come up on the board again. And you think about this place, because the Holocaust didn't start in gas chambers, it ended in gas chambers. It started with stochastic violence, random acts of violence, targeted violence against the Jews. It started with Kristallnacht. What do you think Kristallnacht was other than a mass organized hate crime against the Jews of Europe? So when we talk about what are the path, the steps towards genocide, hate crimes is in the very early stages. Like, this is why this is so important. And I said to them, and in my speech that we showed a little clip of, I said, to the people who have the blue and white flag of my people on their desk, pass this bill. And they all voted en masse against it. So I don't know how you solve that, because I wish people voted with the same values that they see when they visit the Holocaust Center, but they didn't.
Amen, amen. Thank you for being so persistent. So a very interesting question, Dr. Miller-Idriss. Have you ever been accused of being woke?
Yes, all the time.
And use that again?
Yeah. I mean, I get accused of a lot of things that I'm not, which is also, we talked about this earlier, often my hate mail, they're looking for something, right? So I get accused of being a religious identity I'm not, of being trans, of being all kinds of things. And I often get called a woke commie professor who should go back to Russia. And, one of the things I did in my new book, which will come out in September, is I did an analysis of my own hate mail. It opens a chapter. And one of the things I found that's kind of interesting is that if you take away all the hate parts of it, it all involves motion. Every single thing, usually from men, involves motion, which means like go back to Russia, go back under the rock you came out from, get out of view, stop being front and center, send them back, lock her up, right? Get back in the closet, right? All of these kinds of languages that are about like get out of view, right? We don't want to see you. We don't want you to be present. And so that was actually kind of helpful to realize like the threat is me being right here in front of you saying things that are evidence-based, and so it was okay to realize it that way. It creates what we call cognitive dissonance from the hate itself, and so I found it kind of useful. In case I don't get the floor, I want to say one more thing just that I forgot to say before, which is to say that the rest of us in the country, believe it or not, from what you've heard and how hard things are looking at Michigan as the lead state that's doing this work. And so I do want to say we constantly say in PERIL, and I say this on the Hill, I say this wherever I am in the media, that the states we are looking to right now are Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, Washington State, Colorado, all of whom, and New York to some extent, have taken steps that no one else has taken to address these issues, to foreground them, to center prevention, thanks to both of you in large part as well, and to all of you. And so please keep doing it, because we're using you as a model, and the federal government is gone on this issue. Everyone has all the funding, all the staff from across multiple agencies working on domestic extremism really have been decimated. And so the future right now is in the states, and Michigan's leading the charge. So thank you for the work.
Thank you. You have literally put your lives on the line, your careers on the line to do this work. So we thank you for using your voices despite the violence that has been threatened against you. So in one sentence, action item. I always like to leave people with an action item. AG Nessel, what's an action item that people can take?
Speak up. Speak up. Don't let your voices be silenced, and don't hide in a corner, and don't just, watch 90 Day Fiancé all week because you can't stand to see what's happening. You should watch it on Sundays at 9 o'clock on TLC. It's an amazing show. But the rest of the time, if we don't fight back now, we will lose our chance too. And so speak out, be heard, talk to people in your community, talk to your friends, your family, your neighbor, and when you see something that you don't like, speak out against it. When you see something you support, make sure you let people know that, because God knows Noah and I need to hear it if you support our actions. We can't just hear the people who hate us all the time. We have to hear sometimes the voices of people who support our work.
Thank you so much, Representative Arbit.
Thanks, Representative. +1 for both of those things. But I would also say, for the kids in your lives, for whether your grandkids, your kids, your students, or people that you know, like ask them about what they're seeing on their social media and engage with the resources that PERIL has, whatever station you are in life, whatever role that you have, and make sure that people that you know who might be in these spaces too, like if your nephew is a teacher or your son is a coach of something, right? Tell them that there are resources here that we can actually solve these problems. I think so often we think, well, hate's always with us, racism's always with us, extremism is always with us, and to an extent that's true, but it doesn't have to be as bad as it is, and we have amazing, provable tools. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's why when I discovered PERIL and the work that Cynthia and her team does, I was like, oh my God, there actually is a way out of this, and I want to do everything I can to shine a light on that work and to make sure that the tools are in the people who need it the most. So you all are our network, our voices to amplify the fact that these tools exist and there is a light out at the end of the tunnel. And so please spread the word, make a photocopy of the booklet, send it out, post it on Facebook, make sure people have these resources that Cynthia is creating for us. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Well, you took mine, Noah. But I will say that I think it's not as hard as you think to stay informed. So we found it takes 7 minutes of reading on average for parents to improve their pre and post test scores from reading a guide, just to get more informed about online radicalization and risks. It takes everybody else 12 minutes, but parents do it faster. So that tells you a little bit about the multitasking that parents do. And so we often say, you can do it while you drink a cup of coffee. You can go to a whole training, you can go to a weekend workshop like you did, but you can also just read a 12-page guide, skim through it, and know a lot more about what your kids, your grandchildren, your nephews and nieces are seeing. And everyone has a role to play. So I hope that's an empowering message, right? You don't just have to wait for folks to solve this or for big solutions to happen. You can also talk to your neighbor, your niece, your coaches, your friends and people who you know in your community and your faith communities as well, to help people stay informed and know that there are ways to intervene to keep everyone safer. So thank you.
I'm going to add one thing that I thought of as Cynthia was saying, waiting on big solutions. Right now, we know that big solutions are probably not coming from the federal level right now, but I can't think of a bigger form of resistance than making change in the small ways in our own communities to make our communities better. We're not waiting for that change. We're making it right here in West Bloomfield and all the communities around us. These are the tools that you make that will empower us to do just that. And that is the biggest form of resistance that I can think of, because he can't control that.
It is on. Absolutely. And I think that another really positive thing in every kid's life is a good role model. And here, all of us kids here tonight can have these three incredible experts as role models, but we need to be the role models for the kids in our lives and the newly adultish ones in their 20s, the adult light that we live with and we know, because everybody needs to see what it means to be loving and tolerant and fight hate in real time. So I would like to invite Representative Arbit to close out our program.
Thank you, Rabbi Jen. I just want to close by just saying thank you again. Thank you so much, Attorney General Nessel, for everything that you do, for being here tonight, and for really just bearing the brunt of everything that you do on behalf of the law and on behalf of the people of this state, and doing so with tons of resistance, even at the highest levels of government. So thank you so much for that. I'm not sure we'll ever have an Attorney General as amazing as Dana Nessel has been, and I'm truly I don't know what I'm going to do without her. And to Dr. Cynthia Miller-Idriss, thank you so much for being here and for pioneering this field and the work that you do. Truly, I was feeling hopeless, and then discovering PERIL, it's just truly changed my perspective. And we can solve these issues. We can make things better. One guide and one toolbook at a time. And so we're going to do that, and I'm going to help you any way I can. And to my community, my constituents, it's my greatest honor to represent you and to do the work that you sent me here to do. And I hope I make you proud. I do everything I can every day to live up to the trust and to fulfill the trust that you have placed in me. And I will continue to do that no matter that comes down from either side of the aisle at me, and trust it's on both sides. And thank you for being here tonight. And I'm happy to always continue to engage with you on these issues or any other issues. And please do what you can to amplify everything that you've heard tonight, because I think it's really, really important. So thank you, thank you, thank you.